Dawn came slow over the prairie, the kind of light that did not rush, but crept gently across the grasslands, touching every frost-silvered blade as though it mourned too. The sky bled pale gold, and in that tender hush of morning, Evelyn May Carter knelt at the raw mound of earth where her husband had been laid. Her baby stirred against her breast, wrapped in a blanket worn thin at the edges, a bundle of warmth she clung to like the last tether between herself and life. The land was vast and unfeeling, the wind brushing her cheek with a coolness that felt almost like pity. Evelyn whispered a prayer that broke halfway through, her voice carried off by the sweep of air. Behind her, the town moved on without notice. Wagons rattled, hooves struck dirt, and the sound of hammer to nail came from new buildings rising, while her world had been brought to ruin. She pressed her lips to the child's head, inhaling that sweet milk scent, and stood, though her knees trembled. Loss was heavy, but heavier still was the knowing. Her place in her husband's family was about to vanish like smoke. When she reached the McGraw homestead, the place her husband had called home since boyhood, she hoped against all sense that love might soften their hardness. Samuel McGraw stood at the doorway, arms crossed, jaw clenched like iron. His brother Calvin leaned against the rail, eyes narrowed in a squint that held no welcome. "You've no claim here," Samuel said, voice flat as a hammer striking stone. "He's gone, and you ain't blood." The baby whimpered. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words found her tongue. Calvin gave a dry chuckle. "Ain't our burden, woman. Find her own way." The door creaked heavy as Samuel shut it. The sound echoed through her chest like a gunshot. She turned from that porch with the child pressed tight against her heart, the cradle she had once rocked inside that house now swinging empty in her memory. Her breath caught, shame and grief braiding together until her steps faltered. She wanted to fall, to fold herself into the dirt. But she walked on, because the child's cry demanded it. Dust hung low along the main street as she carried herself through town. Men leaned outside the saloon, hats tipped, words traded sharp and careless. "Poor girl," one muttered. Another smirked, "Widow Carter, already looking for pity." Women paused at their washing, eyes following, lips whispering as though her misfortune was a story worth savoring. Clara Whitfield, old as the hills and twice as sharp, shuffled forward with her shawl drawn close. She gave Evelyn a look that carried both pity and judgment. "Hard world for a young mother," she murmured, though the shake of her head told more than her words. Evelyn bowed slightly, unable to answer. Her cheeks burned hotter than the noon sun. She walked past, each step an effort to keep dignity when all eyes tore it away. The night stretched long. She found shelter where she could, a drafty barn offered by no one, merely left unlocked. The wind sliced through cracks in the wood. She lit no fire, fearing to draw anger from whomever claimed the place. Her child's breath rattled with each cough. Milk froze in its tin cup, her hands numb from holding the baby tight to her breast. She whispered lullabies with a voice hoarse from hunger. Stars glittered cold above the holes in the roof. And still she endured, because surrender meant the end of both of them. One morning, by the creek where she tried to wash what little she had, she saw him. Jonas McGraw, the estranged brother, taller, broader, his presence carrying the weight of silence rather than scorn. He did not greet her. He only set something down on a flat stone, bread wrapped in cloth, strips of jerky, and a folded wool blanket. Evelyn froze, child tucked tight to her chest, unsure if it was a trick. Jonas's face was carved with weather, a life spent alone against the elements. His eyes did not soften, yet there was no cruelty there. He turned as if to leave without a word, the gesture itself his language. Her throat tightened. "Why?" she managed. He paused, one hand resting against the brim of his hat. For a long moment the air held still. Finally, in a voice low and rough with solitude, he said, "Land's wide. Shelter in my barn till you find better." Then he walked on, boots heavy against the earth, leaving her with the bread, the blanket, and a thread of hope fragile as glass. That night, Evelyn stepped across the threshold of his barn, child in her arms, hay and wood smoke filling her senses. She pulled the door shut against the biting wind, and for the first time since the grave, she allowed herself to believe, just faintly, that they might not be swallowed by the dark. The barn smelled of hay and leather, of horses shifting in their stalls, their warmth a shield against the cold. Evelyn laid her baby in a basket padded with rags, the soft rise and fall of the child's breath steadying her own. In the silence she could hear Jonas outside, his axe striking wood, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. He gave her no words of comfort, only space and the quiet strength of his labor. It was enough. Days blurred into weeks. She milked his cows in the morning, hands trembling at first, then growing steady. She cooked what little she could with the food he left by the door: beans, salt pork, sometimes coffee ground coarse. He never asked, never pressed. His kindness came like snow melting on the eaves, slow, steady, without fanfare. She felt the shame of dependence prick at her, yet she answered it with labor. Her pride would not allow her to simply take. And so a fragile balance grew between them, as delicate as glass in winter. But towns whisper like dry grass catching fire. Word spread, quick. Widow Carter, living under Jonas McGraw's roof. Men laughed in the saloon. Women frowned at church pews. Clara Whitfield's voice was the sharpest, carrying tales with relish. "Mark my words," she told anyone who'd listen, "it won't end decent." Evelyn walked with her head lowered, clutching her baby, her ears burning as though each whisper were a lash. Jonas seemed untouched by the talk. Yet when a ranch hand made a crude jest within earshot, Jonas's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but the silence he carried afterward was heavier, more final than anger. The weight of family returned with the McGraw brothers. Samuel and Calvin rode up one gray afternoon, dust curling behind their horses like smoke from fire. They found Jonas fixing fence lines, hammer steady, posture unyielding. "That land's ours," Samuel barked. "Always was. Don't think you can hand pieces of it off to some leech with a squalling brat." Evelyn stood frozen near the barn, baby clutched close. Calvin spat into the dirt. "She'll drain you, Jonas." Same as she drained him. Jonas did not answer at once. He set another nail, lifted his hammer, drove it home with a force that cracked the wood. Only then did he raise his eyes, gaze steady as stone. "You'll leave." His voice carried no heat, only a certainty that made even Samuel falter. The brothers muttered curses, rode off with dust and bitterness in their wake. Evelyn's knees shook, but Jonas went on with his work as though nothing had passed, his shoulders bearing both silence and defiance. Through small acts their bond deepened. Jonas patched the roof of the lean-to where she slept. Evelyn cooked stew that simmered rich with herbs she'd gathered. One evening she left a jar of preserves at his door. The next day she found her fence mended without a word. It was not romance, not as the world declared it, but something quieter, roots sinking deep in unseen soil. Winter pressed down hard. Snow came fierce one night, winds shrieking through the cottonwoods. Evelyn huddled with her baby, fire crackling low when the dogs began to bark. Lantern light flickered against the barn wall, and voices rose harsh against the storm. The McGraw brothers had returned, anger sharpened by whiskey and pride. "Come out, Jonas." Samuel's shout tore through the wind. "We'll not have that widow squat on McGraw land." Evelyn's breath came short, heart pounding. She saw Jonas stride from the cabin, rifle in hand, lantern flame glinting off the steel. He planted himself between her and them, shoulders broad against the blizzard's rage. "She stays," Jonas said, voice cutting through the storm. "This land's hers now, if she'll have it. A child needs a place roots can grow." The brothers cursed, spat, and threatened, but they saw it in him, the line he would not let them cross. His rifle remained lowered, yet his stance held the storm itself at bay. At last, with snarls and muttered oaths, they turned their horses into the night, torches sputtering out in the snow. Evelyn's legs gave way, relief and awe tangling into tears. Jonas turned to her, his face lit only by lantern glow. He did not speak of love, nor ask thanks. He only nodded, as though the matter were settled beyond question, and led her back inside where the fire could warm her and the child. Come spring, the snow receded, and the earth softened for planting. Evelyn stood with bare hands in the soil, baby gurgling in the grass nearby. She pressed beans into the ground, each seed a prayer for a future rooted in dignity, not charity. Jonas leaned against the fence in silence, watching. His eyes held pride, though his lips never formed the words. The prairie stretched endless around them, sky vast as a hymn. Evelyn felt her chest lift, air filling her lungs as though for the first time in months. She was not merely surviving now, she was belonging. And perhaps that was the true gift. Not land, nor shelter, but the chance to stand on her own ground without shame. The story closes not with thunder, but with a whisper from the land itself, as if the soil remembered. Kindness can be sown, even in barren places. And to you who listen, let this linger in your heart. We are all given chances to turn cruelty into grace. Not always through grand gestures, but through the quiet offering of shelter, a handful of seeds, or the courage to say, "You belong." That is how roots are planted. That is how hope endures.